that closeness, that feeling of belonging just isn't there. Honestly, I've never really had that many friends. I guess it started in primary school. I did have this one friend called Lucy, and she was a girl that I did pretty much everything with. We hung out a lot, we used to have sleepovers and all that kind of stuff. But then there was a girl called Ellie, and Ellie got very jealous of us, so she became part of our friendship group, and then eventually convinced Lucy that she shouldn't be friends with me anymore. And so Lucy stopped hanging out with me anymore, and I was on my own. And then I moved school. Not for that reason, but just because of my parents were moving house. But because of my past friendship, I had lost my confidence. And so meeting new people was hard for me. But also, because I'd lost my confidence, I was more shy, and I also was a crybaby. So this meant that I was essentially the perfect target for the playground bully. I gave them that satisfaction of knowing that I would cry at the end of them teasing me. And so then I did move several schools, and of course I never really felt like I fit in, because everyone had their friendship groups, people that they'd been friends with for years, and I was just the new girl that came along. Eventually I finally made a friend who was a girl that lived in my village, and we became best friends, and we were friends for quite a long time. I then had another friend who was a girl in my class, and then I had another friend who was the new girl that moved to the area. So at this point then we had a friendship group, and I loved it. Eventually though, we all kind of just stopped talking to each other. The girl who lived in my village, we'd been friends with all the way through college, and then kind of just stopped talking for no real reason. The girl that was in my class, we stayed friends with until maybe the end of uni, and then kind of just stopped talking. The girl that was the new girl, we'd actually fallen out during college, but then we became best friends again during our last years of uni, because we both actually went to London universities. But now, I have no friends. My phone only goes off for either my boyfriend, my dad, or my work. So actually, I'm quite lucky that I can say my boyfriend is my best friend. He's my only friend. And honestly, it kind of hurts. Gosh, don't cry. Goodness me. But when I think of it, maybe the problem was me, because I put myself first a lot. Now, you always hear these things of people saying put yourself first and telling you to do that sort of thing, but actually I think it's dangerous. Hello, just adding in a little bit more information because I didn't explain this enough. The reason why I find this dangerous is because I find that more often than not, it brings out a lot of arrogance in people. And suddenly we go from, respecting yourself to self-importance. And that is a very, very dangerous line that is quite easy to cross. And I find that it's a little bit like the cancel culture, where suddenly if you start saying, well, you're upsetting me, the other person then goes, well, oh, clearly you don't want what's best for me, so what's the point in us being friends? And you kind of just drop them very quickly. And I think a lot of friendships have kind of, died that way through the lack of responsibility actually from the other person, who has now assumed they have no longer any responsibility for the other person's feelings. But I feel like there needs to be a little bit more patience, because yes, you aren't entirely responsible for the other person's feeling, but you have contributed to it. And you do have a responsibility, in my mind, that you should resolve this. And I think if you've already then explained, that it wasn't your intention to upset that other person, and then they still think that you did it out of spite, then okay, it is no longer your responsibility because you've actually tried to resolve it. And I think this is where people are making it a bit murky. Anyway, back to the video. And the thing is I would go to a lot of things on my own. I would go to gigs a lot on my own when I was in my late teens, because I wanted to go to these gigs so bad, and it became almost a risk if I went with a friend, because friends could just easily cancel on you and suddenly they had other commitments that they had to go to. So for me, I went on my own because I knew then I was only responsible for myself to be there, and I could go there because I wanted to, and I would make that effort. Organising with other people became too risky and just too much hassle. So in my mind, if I learned to be okay on my own, then I could basically do everything that I wanted to do. And of course, my hobbies are all solo activities. I've taught myself how to do everything on my own. So it's safe to say that I'm very comfortable in my own company. So comfortable, in fact, that I'm happy and able to organise a trip just on my own, solo travelling. But the thing is, part of my personality is also very comfortable to strike up a conversation with a stranger. As much as I'm comfortable on my own, really do enjoy being in social settings. I love making new friends. I love talking to people. I love hearing their stories and connecting. I like to break the ice because I love to see the moment of when that connection starts to happen. You know, you can just strike up a conversation because of someone's boots that they're wearing or the dog that they have, and that moment of connecting is such a beautiful thing. How someone can open up very quickly once the first move has been made. And so I'm very comfortable also doing that and being the first one to step in and being like, hey, my name is. And so I have made a lot of friends, but not a lot of friends. Not the kind that you can call up and talk about your businesses or your deep thoughts, your worries, or just being more personable with. They're more of the types of people that, you know, you can have a good time with, or they're the friends who are friends because you have a common interest. So I wouldn't say I'm a total loner. I mean, there are people that I know I can talk to, but that closeness, that feeling of belonging just isn't there. I can have conversations with these people and I can feel really, really great after speaking to them, and it feels amazing, but then it can be months before I speak to them again. We are the most connected generation. I mean, we can send a message in an instant, and we have phone coverage that can reach us to just about anywhere at any time. And yet we are the loneliest generation. I mean, it's so easy to make a phone call, but how many of us actually do it? And I know I'm not alone when I say that having a phone call leaves me feeling energized and joyful. Everything is on a high because that feeling of connection is what makes us human. I think craving for those friendships and that connection is completely normal. It doesn't make us desperate. It just makes us human. And studies have shown how meaningful connections actually do affect our health. As we saw with the pandemic, a lot of people's mental health deteriorated when they weren't able to see their friends or their family. But also we use friendships as a metric of self-worth. We feel good when we have friends because we feel like we're trusted. We feel like we're important enough, that we're cared for. And when we feel like we don't have any friends, we feel like we're an outcast, that we're not normal, that we're bad, and that something is wrong with us. But that's not always the case. I think the problem lies in that we have expectations. I mean, we grew up watching TV programs of groups of people that were tight-knitted, they shared everything together, they hung out with each other all the time. And reality is, life isn't like that. We have jobs that we have to fit around. We have family that we also have to fit around. We have our hobbies, and suddenly we don't have enough time to do everything that we want to do. Plus, people move away, circumstances change, and we spend so much more time at work, and yet we still think we can do it all. We then expect that a friend will always show up and that they will know exactly what's going on without even really seeing them. We may expect to meet up a lot. And we have all this criteria that if someone doesn't match up to it, then suddenly they're a bad friend. And we're assessing constantly what box they fit into. But what is a good and a bad friend? I know that I don't have many friends because I think for me, I've definitely placed it too highly on what it means to be a friend. They say to have high standards, but that doesn't really allow anyone to be human, because at the end of the day, we are very imperfect. Sometimes we're disorganized, sometimes we're lazy, sometimes we're forgetful, And of course, we have different ways to deal with all of this, and we're all still trying to figure out what is the right thing to do. Sometimes as well, we might be just a little too focused on what direction that we're going without thinking of the people that we actually have around us. That sometimes friendships get left behind. A friendship is like any relationship. It requires work. And especially when you hit adult life, it requires a lot more work. I mean, it's hard enough just trying to schedule a doctor's appointment, let alone trying to schedule something with your friend, especially if they live in another city from you. And this probably sounds stressful, but it doesn't need to be. It can just be making time for a phone call or sending some flowers in the post. And I can admit that I've allowed friendships to fade away because I didn't make enough effort and I didn't keep up with that communication. So I then felt like if I did make that communication now, it's already too late. Other times it's because I've just had such high expectations of someone that obviously I was left disappointed and I felt hurt. So I didn't want to be friends with them anymore, because if I felt like I was making too much effort, then what was the point? Because when I feel like I've made enough effort or maybe too much effort, the anxiety creeps in and tells me that that person doesn't want to be friends with me anymore, because if they did, they would have made the effort. And at this point now, I'm just harassing them. So of course, I just stop. And I think because we're all so busy with our lives, sometimes we might not notice that person suddenly stops talking. So I guess for now, I'm learning to accept that life as an adult is super hard. Like, it's way harder than I expected. You know, it was so easy to be friends with people at school, stay in contact and everything like that. But once everything else comes in and is demanding attention, it's a lot of work. It's way harder to balance everything. But secondly, my expectations are doing a lot more damage than they are protecting me. I've built up this image in my head of what a friend looks like, what a friend should be like, not really taking into consideration that the same things that I'm flawed with, being a friend for someone else, is sometimes the same flaws as it is for someone else being a friend for me. It's not only damaging my self-esteem, but it's damaging my relationships because I'm making it more complicated than it needs to be. So sometimes I need to tell myself to loosen up and to not just jump to the, oh, well, they don't care about me anymore if I haven't heard from them in a while, and to actually give it a bit of time. And so when I think about this and I take things into consideration more, suddenly I see that actually I do have friends. I've just been defining them wrong.